I never imagined that words capable of squeezing my heart could come from the mouth of a 7-year-old boy. But that day, the trembling voice of my grandson, Matthew, like a faint breeze on a fading afternoon, made the blood freeze in my veins. "Grandpa, when you go to Denver, Mom and Dad are going to keep all your money." I thought I had misheard him. The room was in absolute silence. Only the tick-tock of the grandfather clock marked a slow, heavy rhythm. Matthew was sitting on my lap, his little hands gripping my button-down shirt, his brown eyes clouded with tears. "Who told you that, buddy?" "I heard it last night. Dad told Mom that when you left, they would go to the bank and take out all the money. Mom said you're already old, and you don't need to keep it." I was speechless. 6 months ago, after my mild heart attack, I had added my daughter's name to my bank accounts as a joint holder, thinking that if anything happened to me, she could take care of my affairs. After a lifetime working in the banking sector, I understood the weight of a signature, but I never imagined that this very signature could become the rope that would hang me. I looked at Matthew and saw his small shoulders trembling. He didn't fully understand. He only knew he was revealing something terrible. I forced myself to smile. I placed a hand on his head. "Thank you, son. Grandpa will be careful, but don't say a word to anyone, okay?" "Okay." He nodded and then snuggled against my chest, whispering in a muffled voice, "I don't want them to make you sad." I hugged him tightly, looking toward the kitchen door, where the afternoon light fell across Emily's shoulders. My daughter was chopping vegetables, laughing with her husband, Richard. Her laughter filled the warm kitchen, but to me, it sounded sharp, like the edge of a knife. The memories came rushing back. The day Emily was born, I promised my wife, Carol, that I would protect her from all harm. And now, it was her, my own daughter, from whom I needed to protect myself. That night, when Matthew was already asleep, I sat alone by the old oak dining table. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "Dad, did you confirm your flight? I need to know so I can organize my week." I read the message twice. A totally common phrase, but one that now chilled my soul. I typed slowly. "Yes, I fly out Tuesday at 6 a.m. Back on Friday." Less than a minute later, the reply arrived. "Perfect, Dad. I love you." Those 4 words used to be music to my ears, but that night, they sounded like the click of a locking deadbolt. I turned off the overhead lights, leaving only the yellow glow of the table lamp next to Carol's portrait. Her serene smile seemed to ask me a question. "Do I still trust anyone?" I whispered, almost voiceless. "I don't know, Carol. But if our daughter dares to do this, I won't sit by with my arms crossed." Outside, the dry Texas wind blew through the potted cacti on the back porch. A dry wind, like an early warning of the storm that was about to hit. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. I woke up early the next day, just as I had done for decades. The habit of brewing a pot of black coffee, opening the window to let in the crisp morning air. The aroma of the coffee mixed with the scent of the bougainvillea in the backyard, creating a perfume that was both bitter and sweet, exactly like my life in this moment. I sat in the wooden chair by the window and watched as the first rays of sunlight touched the old photo hanging on the wall, Carol holding Emily when she was 3 years old. Both were smiling, never imagining that one day the trust between them would shatter like a broken mirror. Carol passed away 14 years ago. The day she died, I thought I had no more reasons to keep living. But then there was Emily, my only daughter, the pride of us both, and she gave me a reason to push forward. I raised her alone, working late into the night at the bank, saving every single dollar of my paycheck so she could go to the state university, so she would never lack anything. I clearly remember the day of her college graduation, when she ran to hug me in the middle of the campus quad. "You're my hero, Dad." Those words made me believe that all the sacrifices were worth it. And now, remembering them, I don't know if I'm shivering from the cold or from fear. The fear that the love I gave so completely has turned into a knife aimed squarely at my back. At noon, Emily stopped by the house, bringing me a container of hot soup and my daily vitamins. She still seemed like the same sweet, attentive daughter everyone admired. "Dad, remember to take your pills on time. The doctor said your blood pressure." I nodded with a forced smile, but when her eyes met mine, I saw something different. A calculating gleam, a spark of something that was far from innocence. It only lasted a second. Then she returned to her pleasant, honeyed tone. After she left, I sat in silence. Matthew ran up to me with the wooden boat I had carved for him. "Grandpa, I painted it again. Isn't it cool?" I stroked his hair, hiding my dark thoughts. Those childlike eyes were the only pure thing left in this house. As evening fell, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Emily. "Dad, double-check your tickets. I already booked the hotel in Denver for you. You're going to love it." She spoke as if she wanted me far, far away. I read those words over and over while the gray sky descended over the roof. In my mind, Carol's voice from so many years ago echoed, "You trust too much, Robert. Our daughter is smart, but she's also weak. Don't let her learn to calculate." I answered in a whisper that the wind carried away. "Maybe you were right, Carol." I didn't eat dinner that night. I stood by the window, looking out at the Austin city lights, thinking about the years that had slipped away. The days I held her hand walking her to elementary school, the birthdays with the cakes I baked myself, the times she cried because kids at school made fun of her for not having the newest clothes. I had promised Carol our daughter would never know scarcity, and I kept that promise. But maybe, while giving her everything, I forgot to teach her one vital thing, that there are things money can never buy, like gratitude or respect for the person who gave you life. I turned off the light. The house was enveloped in shadows, and only Carol's photo illuminated my face, the face of a father who was beginning to doubt the daughter he loved most. On Wednesday evening, Emily came back. She said she wanted to have dinner with her dad to keep him company, and she brought Richard with her. They walked in carrying takeout bags from a nice Italian place downtown. The smell of marinara sauce filled the small kitchen. I thought it would bring me comfort, but it didn't. There was something different in the air that night. Too polished, too calculated. "Dad, I brought your favorite, the lasagna. Don't cook anything. Leave it to me." She set the boxes on the table and opened the drawers, looking for plates and silverware as if it were her own house. Richard sat in my armchair, turned on the TV, crossed his legs, and poured himself a glass of my wine. He looked around the room like an appraiser evaluating a property. I poured myself a glass of water, trying to keep up appearances. "Eat up, kids. I'm not very hungry." "Dad, you have to eat. Health comes first," Emily said, smiling sweetly, but her eyes were fixed on the stack of mail and documents I had left on the table. "Oh, by the way, I stopped by Chase Bank today. Is your primary account still just in your name?" A light question, dropped casually, but it turned my blood to ice. "Yes. Why do you ask?" "Nothing. I just thought that after your heart attack, it might be better if I helped you manage it. It would be safer. You shouldn't have to worry about the numbers anymore, Dad. You've worked your whole life. Leave it in my hands." Her voice was sweet as honey, but every word dripped into my ears like acid. Richard chimed in, using a joking tone that carried a sharp edge. "Yeah, Bob. Let Emily handle it. We wouldn't want you making a wrong wire transfer. Older folks get confused. It's nobody's fault." He chuckled and took a sip of wine. I stared at him. Hard. So hard that his smile completely dissolved. "I still remember exactly every single dollar I ever earned, Richard." Emily patted his arm, feigning lightness. "Oh, don't say that. He's just joking. Dad, don't get mad. He's just worried about you." The air grew thick. I didn't say anything else. Inside me, there was only one sensation left: shame. The shame of sitting in my own home and hearing that they already considered me old and useless. Matthew was sitting quietly in the corner. His eyes watched me in confusion, trying to understand why his grandpa was smiling sadly while being humiliated. I gave him a slight nod, telling him everything was fine, but something inside me snapped. After dinner, Emily cleared the plates. While the water ran in the sink, she spoke without looking at me. "I only want what's best for you, Dad. Don't think I'm being greedy. Nobody knows what can happen. If something did happen, at least I'd know how to handle everything." I looked up at her back. The silhouette of a woman who was once fragile, now haughty and unfamiliar. "What's best for who, Emily?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer, letting the sound of the running water drown out the uncomfortable silence in the kitchen. When they left, I stayed seated at the table, staring at the plate stained with red sauce. The smell of the wine Richard had left behind still hung in the air. I felt like a lost guest in my own home. I sighed slowly. "Do you see it, Carol? Our daughter has learned how to hide the knife behind affection." Outside, the night wind slipped through the window crack, bringing the chill of a newly born betrayal. A tiny crack, but one that I knew would, sooner or later, bring the roof of our house crashing down. I couldn't sleep that night. The tick-tock of the wall clock marked a slow rhythm, measuring the anxiety growing inside me. I sat up, put on my bathrobe, and walked into the study. That room hadn't changed since Carol died. The dark mahogany bookshelf, the desk where she used to mend my pants, and a small cedar box she had left behind the place where I kept the most valuable things in my life. I took the box down. Inside were some old photos, a handkerchief embroidered with a C, and a handful of letters yellowed by time. I opened the first one. Carol's rounded cursive handwriting glowed under the lamplight. "Dear Robert, if one day I am no longer with you, don't let loneliness make you blind. Trust, but do not give everything away, not even to our daughter. If you ever feel she is losing her way, be stronger than your love." I read that line over and over until I felt each word break open inside my chest. Carol always saw further ahead. I, on the other hand, navigated life guided by my heart. I loved my daughter to the point of blindness. I thought that after losing her mother, my affection would be enough to fill all her empty spaces. But maybe that's exactly why Emily never learned the boundary between gratitude and abuse. I picked up a photograph. Emily at 12, holding a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked for her mother on Mother's Day. Her eyes were clear, clean, like the morning. I remember telling her, "You will be just like your mother, sweet girl, kind and full of love." Now, I didn't even dare to look at those eyes on the paper. The window rattled softly. A cold gust of wind blew in, scattering some papers across the floor. As I bent down to pick them up, I saw the financial file I had been reviewing that afternoon. It still listed the name, Emily Davis, joint account holder. That name suddenly felt foreign to me, as if it didn't belong to my own blood. I closed the box and put it back on the shelf. "Do you see, Carol?" I murmured in the dim light. "I'm old, but I'm not a fool. They think they can set a trap for me, but I spent my entire life in banking. I know exactly how much money can dirty people." I grabbed a legal pad and began to write down every detail. Dates, times, text messages, Emily's exact words. My old professional rigor came flooding back. Every letter was cold and precise. It was no longer emotion. It was evidence. Just as I set the pen down, my phone buzzed. A message popped up on the screen. "Dad, get some rest. I'm stopping by tomorrow morning with some insurance papers for you to sign." I looked at the screen and smiled faintly, not out of joy, but because I had just figured out her exact next move. I turned off the phone and looked back at Carol's picture. In the shadows, her smile seemed both tender and severe, as if asking me, "Are you ready?" I answered firmly, in a low voice, "Yes, Carol. This time, I won't let anyone tarnish the love we built." Outside, it started to rain. The drops hammered against the shingles while my heart beat to the exact same rhythm. In the midst of that rain, I knew the real storm was approaching, and this time, I had no intention of hiding. The next morning, the sky was gray, covered by a thin layer of Texas dust and clouds. I drove slowly down the familiar downtown streets toward the office of David Sterling, my attorney. I had known him for years from my time at the bank. He was a prudent man, dry but sharp as a razor. Today, for the first time, I was going to him not for bank business, but for my own life. David received me in a brightly lit office with walls lined with case files and diplomas. He shook my hand, his serious eyes framed by black glasses. "Bob, it's good to see you recovered. Is something wrong?" I took a deep breath and told him everything. Matthew's warning, Emily's texts, the dinner with Richard, and the suspicions that had been eating at me for days. David listened in silence, occasionally taking notes on his iPad. When I finished, a heavy silence filled the office. He rested his chin on his hand and spoke slowly. "You said that 6 months ago you added your daughter's name to the account. So, it's a joint account?" I thought it would be practical in case something happened to me. David shook his head. "I understand your trust, but in legal terms, a joint account gives your daughter total access to the funds. If she withdraws the money, it's not considered theft." I felt the floor drop out from under my feet. "Are you saying there's nothing I can do?" "Not exactly. We can remove her name from the account, but we have to do it immediately, before they act." Then he looked at me gravely. "Bob, I'm asking you seriously. Have you signed any documents recently without reading them carefully? That question froze my blood. Yes, 2 weeks ago. Emily said they were life insurance updates, just some standard signatures. David tensed up and immediately pulled a blank file from his drawer. I need you to verify that. Sometimes those documents aren't insurance policies. They are general durable powers of attorney. If that's the case, you could lose not only your money, but your autonomy. His words hit me like a physical punch. I felt like I couldn't breathe. You mean my daughter can sign in my name? Not just that. She can sell your properties, manage your health care, and even put you in an assisted living facility. All perfectly legally. I stood up. My heart was pounding against my ribs. I need to go home. I have a copy. Bring it to me as soon as possible, David said firmly. And Bob, please, do not sign anything else. Not even a routine data update. I walked out of the office with my soul in knots. The sky had opened up, rain lashing against my windshield like a bad omen. In my mind, Carol's old words echoed, "Don't let blind faith turn you into a victim." When I pulled up to my house, I saw Emily walking out the front door, a thick manila envelope in her hand, hurrying into Richard's SUV. The scene was a dagger straight to the chest. There were no doubts left, only an icy certainty. I ran inside and straight to the study, my heart in my throat. In the filing cabinet, the papers were exactly where they always were, perfectly organized, with my signature at the bottom. And right there, bolded at the top, were the words that made me tremble. General Durable Power of Attorney, Emily Davis. I collapsed into my desk chair, my hands shaking. It wasn't just the fear of losing the money, it was the fear of losing myself. In the silence of the room, my voice broke into a fragile whisper. My daughter, why did you choose this path? I sat frozen, staring at the documents on the desk, unable to tear my eyes away from the title. General Durable Power of Attorney. Below it, my signature, firm, familiar, clear, as if I had signed it with full awareness. 2 witnesses, Richard Davis and Sarah Davis, his sister. All perfectly legal, clean, orderly. A ticking time bomb. I took a deep breath and began to read the fine print. The attorney, in fact, shall have full authority over all assets, bank accounts, real estate, and medical decisions in the event that the principal loses the capacity to act on their own behalf. A single sentence was enough to destroy a lifetime of independence. Emily didn't just want the money, she wanted power over my very existence. My cell phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Emily. Dad, I'm swinging by this afternoon with a few more documents to sign, just some property records. I gripped the phone tightly. Every word she typed now reeked of calculation. I immediately dialed David's office. Sterling Law, David speaking. David, you were right. It's a power of attorney. I have the original right in front of me. His voice dropped an octave instantly. Do not sign anything else, Bob. Put everything in a folder and come back here immediately. I will contact the notary to verify it. I'm on my way. I stuffed the documents into my leather briefcase. I was just about to walk out when I heard the crunch of tires on the driveway. I peeked through the blinds. Emily was getting out of her car. She wore a cream-colored business blouse, her hair pulled back, holding a stack of papers. She was smiling, but her eyes were empty. Dad, can I come in? I quickly kicked the briefcase under the desk and threw an old ledger over it. Come on in, sweetie. She walked in, leaving a trail of expensive perfume. I just brought these papers for you to sign quickly so I can update the county property registry. Why the rush? I'm perfectly fine. Nothing is happening to me. Don't say that, Dad. The doctor said your blood pressure has been unstable. I just want to be proactive. Her voice was so disgustingly sweet it felt obscene. I stared right through her. Emily, do you genuinely believe your father has already lost his mind? She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then smiled with thinly veiled disdain. If your mind was that sharp, you wouldn't look so exhausted. I'm just trying to help you, Dad. That fake concern felt like a slap in the face. I understood then. This was no longer my daughter, but someone willing to bury me alive under a mountain of legal paperwork. It'll have to wait. I'm tired today. But the notary is only available today. Then reschedule, Emily. She held my gaze for a long time. Her eyes gleamed with suppressed rage. Then she snapped the folder shut with a sharp clack and stood up. Suit yourself. But if something happens, don't say, I didn't warn you. The front door slammed. I heard the clicking of her heels walking down the porch steps, every strike echoing like a heartbeat of betrayal. I sat there for several minutes until I caught my breath. Then I opened the drawer, pulled out the briefcase, and photographed every single page with a trembling hand. I texted the images to David. His reply came almost instantly. It's a comprehensive POA. She can withdraw funds, sell the house, even petition to declare you incompetent. Do not let her act first. Get over here right now. I locked the front door and grabbed the documents. Before leaving, I looked at the wedding portrait on the wall. Carol and I, holding hands, smiling. I murmured, my love. I let our daughter turn love into a trap. But I won't let her win. I grabbed my car keys and walked out. The house that had once been my sanctuary had transformed into a battlefield. 2 days later, Emily called to invite me to dinner at her house. Dad, I want to make peace. You probably think I'm nagging you too much lately, but I really just worry about you. Her voice was soft as the breeze. I didn't believe a word of it, but I accepted. Part of me wanted to see how far she was willing to go. And another part did it for Matthew, the only tie that still made me want to keep this family together. Emily's house in Westlake Hills was immaculate and cold. White walls, dark modern furniture, everything polished to the point of sterility. When I arrived, Richard opened the door. Right on time, Bob. Just like a banker. I gave a tight smile. Old professional habits. In the open-concept kitchen, Emily was setting the table. The smell of grilled steaks mixed with her strong perfume and tightened my chest. Matthew was sitting on a bar stool looking sad. Grandpa, he yelled, running toward me, but Richard stopped him with a sharp look. Matt, don't bother your grandfather. Let the adults talk. I patted the boy's hair and sat down in silence. Emily poured wine, speaking with forced cheerfulness. I invited Eric from work too. Remember him, Dad? The realtor? He helped me sell the condo last year. I really admire him. I nodded without saying anything, though a knot tightened in my gut. Minutes later, Eric arrived, a guy in his 40s with a loud laugh and restless eyes. He shook my hand and immediately dropped a joke. They tell me you were a branch manager for Chase, huh? Bet you've got a massive 401k stashed away. Emily's lucky to have such a successful, wealthy dad. Laughter filled the dining room. Emily tilted her head and added in an airy tone, Dad was brilliant, yes, but it's time for him to rest now. Finances should be handled by the younger generation. If he kept trying to manage it all, he'd just get confused. A heavy silence dropped over the table for a split second. Richard raised his glass and added, Exactly. When you get older, it's better to hand the reins over to the kids. Emily can handle everything. I set my fork down on the porcelain plate. The clink of the metal was dry and cutting. Do you think I'm no longer capable of managing my own affairs? I asked calmly. Emily smiled, a smile so sweet it physically hurt. Oh, Dad, I didn't mean that, but we've all noticed you've been forgetting things lately. Remember when you accidentally made those 2 wire transfers? I had to call the bank to cancel them. They laughed again. Even Eric. Matthew lowered his head, his small shoulders shaking. I don't know if I smiled or not. I only remember that in that exact moment, what broke wasn't my pride, but my faith. The very last drop of it. Emily stood up and squeezed my shoulder. Dad, don't get mad. I say it out of love. You were a very capable man, but times change. Your era has passed. I looked at her for a long time. The warm pendant lights illuminated her beautiful, confident face, but it looked as foreign as a stranger passing on the street. I answered slowly, my voice low and unyielding. You're right, sweetheart. My era has passed, but never forget that you are living off of what I built. Emily froze, her smile cemented in place. Richard intervened with a nervous chuckle. Come on, let's not talk about business. Let's toast to my father-in-law's health. I raised my glass, watching the red wine swirl like blood. Matthew reached out, grabbed my hand, and whispered, I'm sorry for what Mom said, Grandpa. I squeezed his hand back and replied softly, It's okay, buddy. Sometimes adults forget what really matters. Dinner dragged on for another hour with fake laughter that sounded like dull knives. As I was leaving, Emily walked me to the porch and spoke in a hushed tone. Dad, don't take what I said seriously, but I do need you to sign those property deeds soon. It's just a precaution, you understand? I looked at her under the porch light, half her face cast in shadow. A precaution for whom? Emily. She didn't answer. The heavy door closed behind me. Outside, a thick fog was rolling down the street like a layer of ash. Deep inside me, something began to burn slowly, and I knew that flame was never going to go out. I drove home slowly that night. The streetlights painted golden streaks across the rain-slicked pavement. The smell of the dinner wine still lingered in the car, thick as the taste of contempt. Every laugh from Emily, telling funny anecdotes in front of her guests, hit my brain like a cold hammer. I turned off the engine and sat completely still in the driveway, staring at the front gate. For years, I had walked through that door with pride. Now, walking in made me feel like an intruder. In the flower bed, the bougainvillea Carol had planted was still there, lonely, with dried petals at its base. I reached out to touch a branch. A thorn pricked my finger. A tiny, sharp pain, but entirely real. The next morning, Emily called, "Dad, I'm coming over. We need to talk." "The door is unlocked," I answered coldly. She arrived wearing that same smile that used to melt my heart. She was carrying a thick manila folder. White blouse. Hair pulled up. Richard wasn't with her. "Dad, I've been thinking. I don't want to argue. We just need to get everything in order. I know you're upset about last night, but—" I cut her off. "I'm not upset. I just want to understand what it is you're really after." She sighed and sat across from me. "Dad, I'm worried that when you're no longer lucid, things will get incredibly complicated. If I don't have legal authorization, I won't be able to help you." "Help me," I repeated slowly. "Help me how?" "By declaring that I'm no longer capable of thinking for myself?" She hesitated for a split second, then looked me dead in the eye with metallic coldness. "Dad, I didn't want to put it like this, but your doctor mentioned your memory is slipping. Richard and I talked to a lawyer. If you don't sign, we can petition for a conservatorship. We can go to a judge and get court approval to manage your finances. It's for your own good." I felt my chest split wide open. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow, precise, conscious stabbing. I stood up, gripping the back of the dining chair so my hands wouldn't shake. "For my own good." "You want to protect me by destroying my dignity, Emily." She stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then she spoke, her voice hard, every word landing like a physical blow. "I just want to secure what belongs to me. Who did you work your whole life for? I don't want some outsider coming in and taking what's ours." "An outsider?" I asked dryly. "So, to you, I'm an outsider now too." No answer, just a thick, suffocating silence. Finally, she stood up. "I'll be back this afternoon with a mobile notary. I suggest you don't make this difficult." She turned around. As she was about to walk out the door, I murmured, "Do you have any idea how far you've gone, Emily?" Without turning back, she replied, "I absolutely do, Dad. I've gone exactly as far as your money reaches." The door slammed shut. The house felt entirely empty, devoid of oxygen. I collapsed into the chair, my hands trembling. My eyes were wet, but I had no tears left to cry. The framed picture of Carol on the console table was slightly crooked. I straightened it carefully and whispered, "Do you see, Carol? Our daughter doesn't just want the money, she wants to erase my very shadow." In that instant, everything inside me went completely quiet. There were no tears left, no rage. Just one thing, ironclad determination. I picked up my phone and dialed David's number. "Let's begin, David. I'm not letting them take one more step." On the other end, his firm voice replied, "Understood, Bob. It's time to take it all back." I looked out the window. The midday light filtered in, reflecting off the glass of Carol's portrait as if her eyes were watching me. And I knew right then that the man they thought was weak was officially gone. That afternoon, Austin felt hotter than usual. The sun pierced through the window panes, catching motes of dust floating in the air, a stillness that made it seem like everything was perfectly normal. But inside me, a silent, massive storm was gathering, without a single sound escaping my lips. I was alone in the study, a mug of cold coffee beside me, staring at a picture of Emily when she was a little girl. That little girl with big eyes and a wide smile who I promised, in front of Carol, would never lack anything. Today, that 40-year-old promise had turned into a yoke around my neck. The The ring of the phone shattered the silence. "Bob, it's David. I spoke with the regional manager at Chase. They can help us freeze the accounts and remove your daughter's status as joint owner, but it has to happen today. If Emily walks into a branch before we do, we lose our window." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Do it, David." And the power of attorney. "I am drafting the revocation documents right now, but you have to sign them in my office in front of my notary for them to be legally binding. Plus, we need to gather evidence in case she retaliates." I gripped the phone tightly. "You'll have everything. I'm not afraid anymore." I hung up and walked over to the window. Outside, cars and people passed by, completely oblivious to the war brewing inside my house. A silent battle fought without weapons, only the law and betrayal. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out Carol's cedar box. I lifted our wedding photo, and from beneath the false bottom, I pulled out a thick envelope. Copies of the savings bonds, the deeds to the house, and the corporate shares for the hardware business Carol and I had built from the ground up. I reviewed each document as if every page were a piece of my own flesh. "My love," I whispered. "This time, I will protect what we built. Not for the money, but for your honor, and for mine." Around 3 p.m., I drove to David's office downtown. The sky had clouded over, and the wind was picking up. David was waiting for me in the lobby with a briefcase full of files. "We have to move fast, Bob. I just got word that Emily scheduled an appointment with a mobile notary for later this afternoon. They want to execute the transfers today. Then let them be one step too late." We got to work. David made 3 back-to-back phone calls to bank executives, invoking protocols for suspected elder financial abuse. One manager agreed immediately to freeze Emily's access. The other 2 promised to restore sole ownership to me by the following morning. I signed the revocation of joint ownership. I signed the nullification of the general durable power of attorney. The ink dried quickly, black and cold, just like the resolve fermenting inside me. "Done," David said, his voice heavy. "She will receive the official notice of revocation via certified mail on Tuesday morning, exactly when she thinks you're in Denver." I nodded. "So we have 2 days to prepare." David looked at me with a mix of deep respect and compassion. "I'll tell you the truth, Bob. You are taking back the dignity they tried to steal from you." I smiled wryly. "No, David. I'm just relearning how to stay silent." As I walked out of the building, the rain started to fall. I stopped at the edge of the sidewalk and watched the drops streak down my windshield. It wasn't anger I felt anymore. It was a profound, hollow silence. The silence of someone who has stopped fearing loss. I knew that when this storm ended, Emily wouldn't be the only one changed. I would never again be the naive father who believed that love alone could fix everything. That night, I bought a fake airline ticket to Denver. I packed a couple of changes of clothes into my suitcase and set my alarm for 5 a.m. The plan was in motion. Before turning out the light, I looked at Carol's photo and whispered, "Trust me, my love. Tomorrow I will stay silent, but it will be a silence that makes them tremble." Monday morning broke gray and cold. The wind whipped around the balcony while I cleaned the house with the calm of someone just going through a daily routine. But inside, everything had shifted. Every movement was part of the strategy David called the 3 steps to justice. Step 1. Erase Emily's name from the accounts. David had arranged an in-person meeting with the branch manager at Chase, an old colleague of mine. "It'll be fully processed in 2 hours, he told me. "After that, she has 0 access. Even if she has a debit card, a PIN, or the old power of attorney." I remembered his look when he said it firm, metallic, just like my own look 30 years ago when I ran a branch. Step 2. Transfer all funds and assets into newly established accounts and a living trust. These were opened across 3 different institutions, under different legal structures. "If anyone tries to run an asset search," David explained, "they'll only find empty balances." I agreed. I wasn't doing it out of greed, but because I knew that if Emily managed to take a single dime, she would believe she had won, and I would never get my dignity back. Step 3. Revoke the POA, but delay the notification. This was the most delicate piece. David summarized it like this. "We finalize the revocation today, but the bank system won't flag her until she physically attempts a transaction on Tuesday. She will believe she still has full authority. When she tries to wire the money, the bank will reject it, stall her, and record her reaction. We need her to incriminate herself, Bob. We need her to reveal exactly who she is on camera. I looked at him cautiously. Do you really think she'll go to the bank in person? David smiled grimly. A greedy person never misses their window of opportunity. I returned home that evening feeling a strange mix of relief and crushing sadness. My packed suitcase was waiting by the door. The printed boarding pass sat on the kitchen counter. Departure time, 6 a.m., Tuesday. I knew Emily was waiting for that exact moment to strike. At 8 p.m., my phone chimed, a text from Emily. Dad, I know you have an early morning tomorrow, but don't forget your meds. I just confirmed your hotel in Denver. Love you. I read and reread those last two words. Love you. Not because I believed them, but because I realized she was still using affection as a disguise for treason. I didn't reply. I opened the drawer, took out Carol's cedar box, and placed a new note inside. Tuesday, May 9th. The day I become myself again. I locked the box and placed it in the closet. I barely slept that night. The rain battered the eaves, and the clock ticked away the seconds. With every tick, I felt more awake. At 5 a.m., the alarm went off. I put on the white button-down shirt that Carol always loved. I grabbed my suitcase and walked out the door. I drove 2 blocks down and turned into the back alley, pulling into the detached garage. The garage door closed silently behind me. I had left, exactly as they expected. By 7 a.m., I was sitting in David's conference room. On his laptop screen was a live, secure feed from the Chase branch in Westlake Hills. David looked at me and spoke quietly. Now, we just wait. They'll show up, and you'll see exactly what greed looks like. I sat back, interlaced my fingers, and took a deep breath. Sitting in that brightly lit office, I was no longer the humiliated father. I was a man rewriting his own ending in total silence. The night before my flight, I had stayed up in the dim light of the study, only the desk lamp illuminating Carol's picture. The whole house was quiet, as if even the air was holding its breath with me. Outside, the wind rattled the window panes, bringing in the early morning chill of the Texas hill country. I had left my cold coffee mug on the desk and opened the old leather-bound notebook I had kept since my days as a bank manager. Every page was filled with old notes, banking protocols, signature verification, fraud indicators. It was painfully ironic that after so many years, the notes I thought were obsolete were now my shield against the person I had loved most. In my mind, I heard Carol's voice, soft as a sigh. Robert, if one day I'm not here, you need to know how to defend what is right. I nodded, answering the empty room. I promised you. Remember? Just before midnight, I had walked past Matthew's bedroom. The door was cracked open. A warm nightlight bathed the room. He was sleeping deeply, clutching the little wooden boat I had made for him. I sat on the edge of his bed and watched his peaceful, innocent face, the exact same face Emily had when she was 8. Maybe if I had known how to teach my daughter what it meant to love with integrity, she wouldn't have turned trust into a commodity. I brushed his hair back and whispered, Buddy, you might not see me at home tomorrow, but don't be scared. Everything I'm doing is so that, someday, you get to keep what you deserve. I slipped out, closing the door without a sound. In that moment, my heart was completely serene. The anger was gone. Only profound sadness and an iron determination remained. At 4 a.m., I had brewed another cup of coffee and sat by the window. The streetlights were still on. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained murky. I replayed every memory. The days dropping Emily off at school, the first time she read aloud. The endless nights working late to secure her future. It all played back like a movie that ended with a father whom his own daughter was trying to erase from existence. I looked at the suitcase by my feet. Inside were a few changes of clothes, the fake Denver boarding pass, a bottle of pills, and my old notebook. Props for my role the next day. The father taking a trip to Colorado, I smiled bitter but at peace. At 5 a.m., the alarm sounded. I turned it off. I put on the white shirt Carol loved and the brown jacket she always said made me look younger. I started the car. The engine purred, steady as a resolute heart. I drove 2 blocks, turned down the alley, and parked in the secondary garage. No one knew I was still in Austin. The house sat perfectly still, wrapped in shadows, with only the golden glow of the street lamp reflecting off our old wedding portrait. I grabbed my phone and texted David. I'm in position. They think I'm gone. His reply came instantly. Perfect. Stay quiet, Bob. Today's sunrise is going to be different. I set the phone aside and took a deep breath. Outside, the sky was just starting to lighten. A new day was being born, the day my silence would do all the talking. When the sun finally peeked over the tile roofs of the Austin suburbs, I was already entrenched in David's office. The air inside was tense, but highly controlled. 2 laptops were open on the conference table. One showed the security feed from the Westlake branch, the other ran audio recording software. David, standing by the floor-to-ceiling window watching the empty downtown streets, spoke in a low, gravelly voice. "We just wait, Bob. They think you're mid-flight to Denver. Their play will happen any minute now." I sat at the table, pushing my coffee cup aside. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but because I knew I was about to witness the definitive burial of my trust. David reviewed the paperwork and continued. "The accounts are fully locked. Any access attempt will ping directly to this system. When Emily walks in, the teller's terminal will flag the transaction, and the legal department is on standby. The moment she demands a wire transfer, the branch manager will pull her into an office. The audio feed will activate, and everything goes on the record." I nodded slowly. "We want evidence, not revenge." "I know," he replied, his expression hardening, "but sometimes justice has to land a heavy blow to be seen." At 9:30 a.m., David's phone lit up. A notification flashed on the screen. "Account alert, Emily Davis. Access attempt detected. Branch, Westlake Hills." David looked up, his eyes sharp as lightning. "They're in." On the screen, I saw my daughter. Emily walked into the bank wearing a beige trench coat, her hair tied back, sunglasses pushed up on her head. She walked with supreme confidence. Outside, Richard's gray SUV was idling by the curb. He was the getaway driver. My heart hammered in my chest, but I kept my face entirely blank. I watched as she smiled at the teller and slid the documents across the marble counter. Everything was happening exactly as David had predicted. She spoke to the young employee, pointed to the screen, and signed a slip. The teller typed for a few seconds, and suddenly his expression shifted. Surprise, hesitation, then a quick phone call to his supervisor. Emily frowned, clearly trying to maintain her composure. Within minutes, the branch manager appeared. Through the silent video feed, I watched her body language shift. Her posture turned rigid, her hands moved frantically, and it was obvious her voice had been raised. David picked up his desk phone, answered an internal call, and spoke briefly. "Perfect. Execute the protocol." He hung up and looked at me. The manager just informed her the account is frozen and the power of attorney has been flagged as revoked. She is losing her mind. On the screen, Emily slammed her designer purse onto the counter. She was demanding to speak to the regional director. She dialed her cell phone frantically over and over, probably calling Richard. Her face, twisted in rage, revealed something I already knew. Greed doesn't have a specific shape, but it definitely has a look. David jotted down notes without taking his eyes off the screen. "We have everything we need for a criminal complaint for attempted elder financial exploitation. All we need now is for her to make the phone call." I nodded, my eyes glued to the monitor. At 10:50 a.m., Emily stormed out of the bank, walking fast, her face flushed red. She was yelling into her phone as Richard threw open the passenger door of the SUV. The vehicle sped off, splashing dirty puddle water onto the sidewalk. David allowed himself a cold half-smile. "Act 1 complete, Bob." I leaned back in the leather chair and exhaled a long, shaky breath. Outside, the midday light broke through the gray clouds and reflected onto my face, the face of a man who had been humiliated and was now watching the collapse of those who thought him weak. I felt no joy. Only a single phrase echoed in my mind, like a whisper from Carol riding the wind. "Do you see, Robert? Sometimes, justice doesn't need to shout. It just needs a silence loud enough to make the ground shake." By 11:30 a.m., Richard's gray SUV was likely tearing down Mopac Expressway. David and I were still in the office, 2 mugs of cold coffee sitting between us. On the bank feed, there were only employees left, gossiping about what had just happened, a furious woman who had demanded to wire hundreds of thousands of dollars and had left utterly humiliated. "She knows the whole house of cards just collapsed," David murmured. "Hold on, your phone is going to ring any second." And it did. Less than 5 minutes later, Emily flashed on my screen. Don't answer, David instructed. Let it go to voicemail. It rang for a long, insistent time before stopping. Then, the voicemail notification popped up. I put it on speaker. Dad. I was just at the bank. They're telling me the account is frozen and the POA was annulled. What is going on? I've been trying to call you. You said you were on a flight to Denver. Where are you? Call me back right now. Please. Her voice was shaking, on the verge of breaking. David noted the timestamp and smiled with grim satisfaction. Perfect. She just confessed that she planned the entire heist for when she thought you were out of state. We just need one more call to close the loop. I stared at the phone, a crushing weight sitting on my chest. I didn't feel anger, just a bottomless, hollow sadness. Hit record, David. I dialed her number. Dad, you finally answered. I am losing my mind. Why did you freeze my account? Your account? I asked, my voice low, steady as bedrock. Do you honestly believe that money belongs to you? Don't say that. It's family money. I just wanted to organize things because you're getting older. If I don't handle it, who will? I am still perfectly lucid enough to take care of myself, Emily. There was a brief pause. When she spoke again, her voice cracked, heavy with venom. No, you're not. You don't understand anything. Mom died, and you just live in a fantasy world. You never thought about me. I just want to recover what's rightfully mine. I gripped the phone tighter. What you want isn't a right. It's power, and you just lost both. What? What are you talking about? I'm not in Denver, Emily. I'm right here in Austin. I know everything. The fake insurance papers, the attempted wire transfer, your little plot with Richard. I'm sitting with my lawyer. I have the recordings, the bank managers, the witnesses. You exposed yourself. An icy silence fell over the line. Then, a stifled gasp. That's impossible. Who told you? It was Matthew. I closed my eyes. Yes. Your 7-year-old son saved his grandfather. And he saved your conscience. If you have any left. Her muffled sobbing morphed into pure fury. No, you can't do this to me. I'm your daughter. I'm your blood. And Mom's blood too. I answered. You forgot all about blood the second you turned your father into prey. The silence dragged out. All I could hear was the static of the line and the wind rushing against her phone until there was a sharp click. David stopped the recording software and nodded. That's it, Bob. She confessed to all of it. The POA, the intent, the motive. We have an airtight case. We won. I slumped back in the chair and exhaled slowly. I didn't smile. There was no victory in this room. Just a void that weighed heavier than lead. Win. Tell me something, David. Does anyone ever actually win in a war between a father and a daughter? The lawyer stayed quiet. Outside, the clouds were finally breaking, and beams of afternoon sunlight slashed across the glass panes. I looked down at my hands, the same hands that had signed thousands of loan documents and contracts over my lifetime. Now, they were trembling because they had just signed the death warrant of a father's trust. Prepare the filing, I said, my voice hoarse, but don't submit it to the district attorney's office yet. I want my daughter to understand that justice doesn't scream. It just stands there. Totally still and entirely inescapable. I looked out at the street below, where the city carried on in its chaotic rhythm. But inside me, there was only an immense silence, the exact place where love and pain intersect, and where justice is quietly born. That afternoon, the sky over Austin turned bruised and dark. Heavy clouds threatened a severe thunderstorm. I was still in David's office, under the fluorescent lights shining down on the massive stack of files we had compiled. Every piece of paper was a surgical cut into my memory, proof of a betrayal that still felt impossible to accept. David clicked off the recorder and neatly stacked the folders. Bob, go home and get some rest. The detective from the Financial Crimes Unit will contact you tomorrow to take your formal statement. I nodded, but I didn't get up. David, play the recording one more time. He hesitated for a second before hitting play. Emily's voice filled the room, first shaking, then furious, and finally, desperate. I just want to recover what's mine. You're old, Dad. You don't understand anything. Every word was a familiar, freezing needle. When it ended, I murmured, That's enough. David watched me carefully. Do you want me to hold off on turning this over to the police? She is your daughter, after all." I shook my head slowly. "No. But I want to talk to her one last time." I drove home that evening. Everything was exactly where I left it, but the very air in the house felt different. The space that used to hold laughter now only echoed with the tick-tock of the clock. I sat down, turned on the desk lamp, and stared at my cell phone. The screen was filled with a dozen missed calls from Emily. I hit her name. She answered on the first ring, her voice wrecked from crying. "Dad. Dad, please, just listen to me. I didn't want to hurt you. I was just terrified of losing everything. Richard said that if we didn't get control of the assets, the bank or the state could take the house if you had to go into a nursing home. I didn't know what to do." I stayed completely silent. Only her ragged breathing came through the speaker. "Dad, I swear, I made a huge mistake. But you have to understand. I just wanted to protect myself and Matthew." "Protect," I said, my voice low and unyielding. "You call forging my intent and deceiving your father an act of protection?" "I didn't know it was going to be this serious," she sobbed loudly. "I just did what Richard told me. We needed the money. We were drowning in debt. I didn't want to." I cut her off with a cold, almost clinical tone. "You didn't want to, but you did it anyway. You lied to my face. You signed the paperwork, and you used my name to wash away your own guilt. Have you stopped for 1 second to think about how your mother would look at you right now, Emily?" Silence. Then a choked, broken whisper. "I miss her so much. Ever since she died, you just buried yourself in your work at the bank. I was willing to do anything just to make you see me, to make you acknowledge me. I just wanted you to look at me the way you looked at her." I felt a massive knot form in my chest. In that exact moment, I understood. Her greed wasn't just born out of money, it was born out of a void that I had unintentionally left behind. "We can't change the past, Emily," I said slowly. "But every action has consequences, even when there is forgiveness. Tomorrow, you are going to speak with the authorities. David will explain the legal process. Do not run." "Are you really going to press charges, Dad?" "I have no other choice." I heard nothing but her weeping, followed by a barely audible whisper. "I'm sorry, Dad." I hung up. I set the phone on the desk and leaned back in my chair. There was no rage left, and no tears, just a freezing emptiness expanding in my chest. On the desk, Carol's framed photo caught the light of the lamp. I looked at her smile and murmured, "Do you see, my love? I kept my promise. I didn't yell. I didn't seek vengeance. I just stepped aside and let justice do its job." Outside, thunder cracked open the Texas sky. The rain hammered the roof shingles violently. But beneath the roar of the storm, I heard the steady, calm beating of my own heart, the heart of a man who had just lost his daughter but had reclaimed his soul. The next morning, the sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds, pale as the final breath of a long, stormy night. I woke up early, not out of anxiety, but because my body was already accustomed to the long mornings of a solitary life. The house was dead quiet. The only sounds were my own footsteps on the hardwood floors and the relentless ticking of the clock. David called at 7:30 a.m. "Bob, the police report is officially filed. Adult Protective Services and the DA's office will be contacting you and Emily today. The accounts holding your assets are fully secured in the new trusts. And Richard, his tech firm was just notified of the fraud investigation. He's been placed on indefinite leave." I nodded into the phone. "Thank you, David. But you know, when justice finally arrives, it rarely brings joy with it." There was a brief silence before he answered quietly. "Maybe that's because justice doesn't exist to make us happy, Bob. It exists to remind us how to live with integrity." After I hung up, I brewed a pot of coffee and stood by the window, watching the oak trees sway in the wind. The smell filled the kitchen, so familiar that it physically ached. Carol used to drink her coffee on Sunday mornings, always putting on an old Frank Sinatra record. I pulled up one of those songs on my phone. The horns and strings swelled warm and smooth, but today, the music felt like it belonged to another universe. Halfway through the song, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. It was Matthew, holding the hand of Teresa, Emily's babysitter. The boy ran past her and threw his arms around my waist, whispering, "Grandpa, Mom didn't come home last night." I stayed with Miss Teresa. I stroked his hair and gave him a tender smile. "It's okay, buddy. Your mom just needs a little time to sort some things out." Matthew looked up. In his clear eyes, there was a deep anxiety that he didn't fully understand, but profoundly felt. "Is she mad at you, Grandpa?" I swallowed hard and answered in a warm, quiet voice. "No, my boy. Sometimes adults just forget how to love each other." He nodded and buried his face in my stomach, hugging me tighter. In that embrace, for the first time in weeks, I felt genuine warmth. Maybe this was the only piece of my family I had left, a little boy who still believed that love could fix anything. At noon, David stopped by with the final trust documents to sign. When he left, I stood on the porch and watched his car disappear around the corner. A strange breeze kicked up, lifting a few pink bougainvillea petals and dropping them right at my feet. I picked one up, rolling it between my fingers, and murmured, "Do you see, Carol?" Justice arrived. And yet, it feels so incredibly empty. By late afternoon, the house had fallen into total silence. No calls, no text messages, no voices, just stillness. I pulled out the cedar box and opened the piece of paper I had written on a few days prior. Tuesday, May 9th. The day I reclaimed my identity. Right below it, I grabbed a pen and added a new line. But also, the day I lost my only daughter. The sun was dipping behind the roofline, casting a golden glow over Carol's wedding portrait. I sat down, closed my eyes, and let the old Sinatra tune play on loop. There was no anger left in me, only a soft, quiet sorrow. The sorrow of a father who had won the war, but had absolutely no one left to share the victory with. I took the last sip of my coffee. The bitter taste coated my tongue. A faint, exhausted smile crossed my face. "Carol," I whispered, "I managed to protect everything we worked so hard to build. I wish I could have protected our daughter's heart." Outside, the wind gusted again, scraping the dry oak leaves against the window pane. And in that moment, I understood the hardest truth of all. Sometimes justice arrives right on time, but entirely too late to save love. 3 days later, Austin was baking under a brutal, unforgiving sun, but inside me, everything was still wrapped in a thick fog. That morning, David called, his voice extremely serious. "Bob, the DA is moving forward. Emily and Richard were formally arraigned on charges of elder financial exploitation and conspiracy to commit fraud. Because it's a first offense, they'll likely plead down to strict probation, but they are stripped of any fiduciary rights and will be under heavy court supervision." I stayed quiet for a few seconds before answering calmly. "Thank you, David. I just hope they have some dignity left." That afternoon, I drove out to the grocery store. When I pulled back into my driveway, 2 figures were standing by my front door. Emily and Richard. They looked completely destroyed. Their clothes were wrinkled, their faces pale and exhausted. I hesitated for a second, but Emily called out, her voice shattered. "Dad, please, just listen to me one last time." I stopped a few yards away from them. Richard avoided making eye contact, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Emily took a step forward, her eyes bloodshot. "Dad, I failed. I'm not going to try to justify it, but I lost everything. Richard lost his job. Our savings are frozen in legal fees. Our reputation is gone. I have nothing left, except Matthew." I looked her dead in the eye, my voice serene but unshakable. "You still have time to be the mother that boy deserves." She broke down, sobbing, and reached out to grab my hand, but I slowly pulled it back. "Dad, I am so sorry." The greed completely blinded me. I completely forgot that the most valuable thing in my life was you. I sighed and looked away. "You didn't forget, Emily. You just pretended to, because you thought this old man couldn't see past his own nose anymore." Richard took a step forward, his voice barely a whisper. "Bob, I owe you an apology too. I was an arrogant idiot. I thought money was the only metric of success. Today, I realized that losing the respect of a man like you hurts a hell of a lot more than a criminal record." I didn't reply. I just looked at them. 2 people who once believed they were untouchable, now standing with their heads bowed on my front porch. The scene didn't fill me with anger. It only filled me with bone-deep exhaustion. "Go home," I told them softly. "I have already forgiven you, but the law hasn't. You will have to face the consequences of your actions. Just take care of Matthew. Do not let him grow up carrying the same wounds that you inflicted on yourselves and on me." Emily dropped her head, tears streaming silently down her face. Richard gently took her arm and guided her back to their car. When they disappeared past the bougainvillea bushes, a freezing void expanded in my chest. Back inside, the picture of Carol on the console table was slightly tilted. The afternoon sun hit her eyes, and I felt like she was watching me. I whispered into the quiet room, "You see, my love? They are paying the price, not in a prison cell, but with regret, and maybe that's the cruelest punishment of all." I closed my eyes. Outside, the wind rustled the branches of the oak trees, and in the murmuring leaves, I thought I heard her sweet, distant voice whispering, "Robert, I'm so proud of you. You chose justice, but you never lost your compassion." A month later, as the legal dust was beginning to settle, I received a phone call from an unknown number. A woman's voice spoke on the other end, soft, but highly professional. "Good morning, Mr. Davis. My name is Agent Miller. I'm a social worker with Texas Child Protective Services. We need to speak with you regarding your grandson, Matthew Davis." My heart dropped into my stomach. I stood perfectly still. "Has something happened to Matthew?" "He's physically unharmed, Mr. Davis," she replied. "But Matthew disclosed some information to his school counselor about events occurring at his home. We need to verify certain details about his home environment, and we need to know if you would be willing to assume emergency temporary custody." That afternoon, 2 CPS caseworkers sat in my living room. They reviewed the court documents regarding the financial abuse case, inspected the house, and asked me detailed questions about my relationship with my grandson. One of them looked up from her clipboard. "Matthew told us he heard his parents planning to steal his grandfather's money, and that he was terrified. He also mentioned he was the one who warned you. He is carrying a massive amount of guilt. He feels responsible for tearing his family apart." I sat frozen, my hands clasped tightly together. "Matthew didn't do anything wrong," I said slowly. "He was the only person brave enough to tell the truth. That little boy saved me." The caseworkers nodded. "Both parents are currently under strict court supervision and are facing financial ruin. Given the extreme stress and criminal nature of the household right now, the state strongly recommends that you take custody to provide the child with a stable, safe environment." I looked around the room. This house, which for months had only echoed with the ghosts of betrayal, suddenly felt capable of becoming a home again. "I accept," I finally said. "Matthew belongs here with me." 2 weeks later, Matthew officially moved in. He arrived on a Saturday morning carrying a small rolling suitcase and the wooden boat I had made for him. When he saw me standing in the doorway, he dropped his bag, ran up, and hugged my waist. "Grandpa, I'm so sorry I told on Mom." I dropped to one knee and looked him straight in the eyes, the exact same eyes Emily had when she was a little girl. "No, buddy. You did exactly the right thing. You didn't break anything. You just stopped the adults from doing something much worse. Never, ever apologize for telling the truth." Matthew sniffled, nodded, and asked in a tiny, timid voice, "Are you still mad at Mom?" I brushed his hair out of his eyes, fighting back the lump in my throat. "I'm not mad, buddy, just sad. Sometimes, the people we love get lost, and we can't save them. All we can do is hope they find their way back." That night, while Matthew was doing his math homework at the study desk, I brought him a glass of milk. The warm glow of the desk lamp illuminated his face so focused, so incredibly calm. I realized that the house wasn't freezing anymore. In the scratch of his pencil on the paper, I heard the heartbeat of life returning to a place I thought was dead forever. I watched him in silence and smiled tenderly. "Thank you, Matthew," I murmured under my breath. "You taught me that sometimes the small courage of a child is the only thing strong enough to save the soul of an adult." 2 months passed, and my small house in Austin was completely transformed. The cold silence that used to suffocate the rooms had been replaced by the sound of Matthew's laughter every morning, the thud of his sneakers running down the hallway, the sound of old Motown records I played while making breakfast. The kitchen, which used to smell strictly of bitter black coffee, now smelled of warm milk and buttered toast. The life I thought was coming to a dark end had offered me a brand new chapter, simple but full of warmth. Matthew adapted quickly to his new routine. Every afternoon when he got off the school bus, he would tell me his tiny stories. Who got in a fight at recess, who the teacher praised, or how he aced his spelling test. I listened, nodded, and smiled, realizing that these tiny, mundane moments were actual treasures. One afternoon, while I was watering the plants on the back porch, Matthew walked out holding a piece of drawing paper. "Grandpa, I drew a picture of us. This is you, and this is me." He pointed to a figure with long hair and a sweet smile. "And that's Grandma Carol. Mom always told me she was a really good person." I looked at the crayon drawing. A heavy knot formed in my throat. At the bottom, written in messy, uneven letters, it said, "Happy Family." I patted his shoulder and murmured, "Your grandma is definitely looking down right now, smiling. She's so proud to have a grandson who knows how to love like you do." At night, when Matthew was fast asleep, I made a habit of writing a few lines in my journal. I wrote down every small victory. Today, Matthew helped make chicken soup. He asked about his mom today, but he didn't cry. Those entries were more than just memories. They were my way of thanking God for bringing the light back after so much darkness. Emily, per the judge's orders, was still under strict probation and wasn't allowed unsupervised visitation. Even so, every single week, she mailed a letter through her attorney. She never made excuses. She only expressed deep remorse. In one of the letters, she wrote, "Dad, I know I don't deserve to call you that anymore, but I want you to know I am trying to fix my life. Richard moved out. I'm living in a tiny apartment by the airport, and I got a job stocking shelves at a retail store. At first, the shame was unbearable. People I used to know looked at me with disgust, but I'm learning how to lower my head without losing my dignity. Dad, I finally understand. Money never buys peace. I always thought your silence was weakness, but now I know it was absolute strength. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I only pray that someday you'll let me see Matthew, even for just 5 minutes. Not to ask him to forgive me, but to tell him his mother finally learned how to live an honest life." I never replied. But I kept every single letter in Carol's cedar box, not to forget her, but to hold on to them until the day my heart could read them without bleeding. One night, Matthew woke up to get water and saw me sitting at the desk. He walked over, rubbing his eyes, and asked softly, "Grandpa, are you sad?" I smiled, pulled him into a hug, and sat him on my knee. "No, buddy. Just having you here makes me the happiest man in the world. Sometimes God doesn't take things away from us, He just moves them to a different place so we can learn how much they're really worth." The boy rested his head against my chest and whispered, "I'm happy too. Because now you don't have to be by yourself anymore." I held him tight. Outside, the Texas night wind rattled the bougainvillea, carrying a sweet, familiar scent that felt exactly like Carol's breath. In that moment, I knew I had survived the absolute worst of the storm, only to rediscover the simplest, most profound things in life: a home, a child, and a heart that had relearned how to love. Time slipped away faster than I ever could have imagined. Over the next 5 years, Matthew grew like a weed. He's 12 now, nearly up to my shoulder. His voice has deepened, and in his eyes, still as clear as ever, there is a maturity that came far too early. Every morning, he walks into the kitchen with that same bright smile. "Morning, Grandpa." That simple phrase is like a pilot light that keeps the whole house warm. I never thought I would find such profound peace in my old age. Matthew is a good kid. A straight-A student, polite, and above all, deeply fair. He doesn't ask about his parents very often. He just goes a little quiet when he sees other kids holding their mother's hands at the grocery store. I never force the subject. I just teach him what matters. A man isn't measured by his bank account, Matt. He's measured by who he is willing to protect, and he gets it. I see it in his actions when he helps the elderly neighbor carry her groceries, or when he splits his lunch with a kid who forgot theirs. One crisp autumn afternoon, while I was pruning the bushes in the front yard, the mail carrier handed me a thick envelope. The return address read, "Emily Davis." I stared at it for a long time before sliding my thumb under the flap. The handwriting was exactly the same, slanted, delicate, but now slightly trembling. "Dad, I don't know if you'll even read this, but I had to write it. For 5 years, I have lived in total silence, exactly the way you taught me. I don't have a house anymore. I don't have Richard. I live in a studio apartment in the suburbs, and I work as a manager at a local tailor shop. At first, the judgment from people was suffocating, but I learned how to keep my head down and work hard. Dad, I finally get it. All the money in the world can't buy a good night's sleep. I used to think your quietness meant you were weak, but I know now it was the ultimate strength. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want to know if, someday, you might let me see Matthew. Just for 5 minutes. I just want to look him in the eye and tell him his mother finally learned how to be an honest woman. I folded the letter and placed it inside Carol's cedar box, right next to the letter she had left me. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel resentment. I only felt a serene compassion, the kind of love that no longer tries to hold on, but simply hopes the other person finds their way out of the dark. That evening, when Matthew got home from middle school, I sat him down at the kitchen table. "Would you like to see your mother?" He stopped what he was doing and stared at the table for a few seconds. "I'm not mad at her anymore, Grandpa. I'm just scared she'll be sad when she sees how much I've grown up without her. But if she really wants to, yeah, I'll see her." I looked at him and recognized something in his soul that his mother had lost years ago, the capacity for grace. "Okay," I told him. "When you're ready, we'll give her a call." Later that night, I stood by the window, watching the yellow porch light spill across the driveway. Life, when it all comes down to it, has no real winners or losers. Some people pay their debts in tears, others pay it with the loneliness of passing years. I took a sip of my decaf coffee and smiled to myself. Carol used to say, "True love doesn't need to win every battle. It just needs to be generous enough to keep us from becoming cruel." Now, I finally understood. I didn't need to win. It was enough for me to watch my grandson grow into a good man, and to know that my daughter, after losing everything, had finally learned how to be human. Outside, the cool night breeze rustled the bougainvillea, leaving a faint, sweet scent in the air. And staring at my own reflection in the window glass, I whispered, "I think, Carol, we've finally found peace." That evening, Matthew and I sat out on the back porch. The Texas sun was setting, casting a golden, peaceful light over the hills. He was working on his homework while I sipped my coffee, the same small ritual that has anchored my entire life. Sitting there in the warm, quiet air, I thought about Carol, about Emily, and about everything we had left behind. Matthew looked up from his notebook and asked, "Grandpa, why do you never say anything bad about Mom?" I smiled, looking at him with immense pride, and answered slowly, "Because, buddy, some wounds only heal when we stop picking at them. I stay quiet not because I forget what happened, but to protect the good memories that are still left. Even though your mother made terrible mistakes, once upon a time, she was a little girl who was deeply loved." Matthew nodded, displaying a maturity that still caught me off guard. "I think Mom understands everything now. I want to see her soon." I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "Whenever you're ready, I'll drive you." The evening breeze blew gently, carrying the scent of the blooming flowers. I watched the golden light catch Matthew's hair and felt a profound sense of closure. Years ago, I was terrified my life would end in absolute bitterness. But sitting here, looking at this young man, I realized that every loss has a purpose, to teach us how to love all over again. I spoke quietly, almost to myself. "People say that staying quiet makes you a coward. But sometimes, son, silence is the purest form of justice. It lets time do the healing. And sometimes, staying quiet is just another way of loving someone." Matthew gave me a sweet, knowing smile. "Then you're the best at loving people, Grandpa." I chuckled and clinked my coffee mug against his glass of milk. "No, I'm just a guy who had to learn how to do it all over again." After losing everything, the sun finally dipped below the horizon. The crickets began to chirp in the grass, and Matthew's laughter filled the quiet air. I looked up at the framed picture of Carol hanging on the porch wall. Her smile remained warm, untouched by time. I whispered into the wind, as if she were sitting right next to me. "We won, Carol. Not with anger, but with peace. Because sometimes, silence is a legacy too. The legacy of love and forgiveness." If this story moved you, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. To hear our next story, click the video on the left side of your screen. Thanks for watching.